We got a great turnout. Thank you all for being here already. We may have a few more join, but Alex, if you'd like to get rolling, there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah, we'll make an official start. Welcome to everybody that joined partway through some conversation. We were just trying to fill the awkward silence that often begins every Zoom meeting. And so I appreciate you all being here and for having an interest in at least learning some more about foster care and hopefully potentially looking to find some different avenues to become involved in foster care. Thank you to a handful of people who have volunteered their time tonight to share their specific perspective and the work and the space that they fill in the foster care field. But really tonight is hopefully going to be educational and informational. It's really designed to give everybody who's joined us an opportunity to ask some questions and really just to find out what foster care could mean for you. I think foster care comes with a lot of either stigma or urban myths. And so we want to speak to some of those tonight, confirm maybe some of the things that may be true, but more than likely dispel the ones that are not true. So the plan is to really give our guests no more than a handful of minutes to explain very briefly who you are and what you do and the work that you do. And then we'll cycle through 4 or 5 people. And then we're just going to open it up to some Q&A. You can either ask or raise a hand or type a question in the chat box and we'll, in one form or another, get to your questions. And then Dave and I did talk about towards the end of our meeting, depending on how conversation goes, creating some breakout rooms. And so, for example, if you were very interested in becoming a guardian ad litem, for example, and you may not know what that means right now, but in 45 minutes you will, and you'll be very interested in what that could mean for you, then we may be able to make a breakout room for Stephanie, who you're all going to meet in a few minutes, and ask some direct questions of her about what that means. And so that's our plan, but this is going to be informal and hopefully educational. So Amy, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. And then if you want to share about who you are, what you do, some of the needs that you see in the sphere that you fulfill. And then once you're finished, then I'll bounce on to the next person.
Sounds great. My name is Amy Huntsman. I work with the Buncombe County Department of Health and Human Services. My role is primarily to work in licensing and recruitment and retention of foster parents in our community. So I would share that currently we have around 320 kids in foster care that are under the age of 18 and another 30 or so that are voluntarily in foster care from the ages 18 to 21. We've had a pretty big spike in those numbers recently. I think even today we had 7 new children come into foster care. Where they're coming into foster care for all kinds of different reasons. It may be that there is a substance abuse issue or a domestic violence issue in their family. It could be that there are significant mental health issues or some kind of need that's not being met with the child. So our job is to go out and find some awesome people like you in the community that can see those issues in the community and like have the heart and the energy and the desire to want to change it and make it better for these kids. So the county is I guess the public entity of foster home licensing versus someone like a LIDA or Crossnor or Black Mountain Home. They're called private agency, and really there's not so much of a difference when it comes to the kid. They're having a set of foster parents and a social worker and a guardian ad litem and all those things. It's a little different on on the, I guess, the administrative side of things, but for all intents and purposes, no matter where a foster family gets licensed, they can expect to have a case manager that's supporting them through the process, the opportunity to have education and support around the placements of their kids. So in Buncombe County, in our county, we have about 85 homes licensed with our agency, and I have 5 different workers that are doing all the training, going out to the community, doing talks, ongoing training, and all those types of things. And we as a county do work in partnership with all of the child private agencies in order to make sure that all the training that everyone gets is standard across the board. So no matter who licenses a home one of our kids goes into, they all have the same information and the same opportunity to serve our kids. with the highest level of love and care that you can imagine. So anyway, so that's what I do, you know, in general. Does that work for you, Alex? Is that a good breakdown?
That's perfect. Thank you, Amy. I'm sure that there'll be questions once we've circled through everybody. One thing I did want to mention, just to pick up on something that Amy said, because I know that I will forget it. One of Amy spoke about the differences between a public and a private agency. One of the benefits of county programs is the guarantee that children will stay in county, as opposed to being placed with a private agency in a neighboring county or further afield. And that's a systemic problem in the state. And so that's certainly one of the biggest benefits that Amy and her team have, is the guarantee that children in Buncombe County get to stay in Buncombe County. And so I wanted to say that before I forgot. So wonderful. Okay, so Brent, I have you on my list next. I just made a list of everybody, and so you came up second. So I don't know if you'd introduce yourself and share the role that you fill and what you do and the needs that you see would be great. Thank you.
I'll get myself unmuted there. Okay, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. And I would just put a plug in for Amy and her staff. I mean, we both work at DSS, and she supervises the licensing unit. She and her people do a really good job of training foster parents and doing their best to support foster parents. So I can't say enough about them. Amy also used to supervise the 18 to 21 program, the extended foster care program, which is what I do. So she used to be my boss. And Merry Christmas, Amy, one of the best bosses in the building. So anyway, like I say, I do extended.
You get a raise, Brent. Congratulations.
I do extended foster care. I work with the kids who reach their 18th birthday and do what we call quote unquote age out of foster care. At that point, they are able, if they so desire, to sign a voluntary placement agreement to continue to stay connected with the agency and have a social worker to continue to support them and help them with the transition from being a minor to being a legal adult and making their own decisions and not having a foster parent make all their decisions for them anymore. And like I say, they can sign that at the age of 18, or they can choose not to. But then if they want to have their own plan and they try that and it doesn't work out too well, they can come back and say, okay, I think maybe I do want to do this 18 to 21 thing. So they can sign at the point they turn 18, or they can choose not to and sign up later. Or they can sign at 18 and then go for a few months and not like it and say, okay, I'm done, and they can leave. And then a few months go by and they can come back and say, I want to sign up again. So it's a real fluid kind of program. But my job is to assist them with that transition from being in foster care to being out on their own and making their own choices and finding a place to live and getting a job and learning to support themselves and pay their rent and their bills each month. And you know, if they don't have a driver's license and a car, to help them work towards that. There are resources through the department that can help with those kinds of things. So I'm the kind of the point person for those resources. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And like I say, it goes from their 18th birthday until their 21st birthday. And so, you know, one of our objectives is to try and expand their network of supportive adults, people that they can seek out when times get tough, or when they need advice, or when they need a place to go for a holiday, or, you know, whatever the case might be. So if somehow that, you know, something like that can come out of something like this, then that would be awesome. But that's kind of what I do in a nutshell.
Beautiful. Thank you, Brent. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, next on my list, in no particular order, Stephanie, I was going to ask if you wanted to share about who you are and what you do, and the need and the importance of the role that you play.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Stephanie Minnick, and I am a guardian ad litem for Buncombe County. So I'm a trained volunteer, and I am a child advocate. So I speak on behalf of the child's best interest in the courtroom. Some of these children may or may not be in DSS custody, but typically their parents or caregivers have been charged with either neglect or abuse, and that's why they've landed in the system. So I meet with the kids, I meet with biological parents, family, foster parents, doctors, teachers, really whoever is in the child's life. I'm able to sit and talk with them, have them shed some light on what's going on for the child. And if the child is old enough to talk to them about it, I will ask them, where they want to be, what's going on. At this point, I've had really little ones. So a lot of them haven't been able to express their wishes to me. I also work with the social workers, attorneys. Sometimes I testify on behalf of the child's best interest in the courtroom. And, our goal is to definitely reunite them with family if possible, but sometimes because of addiction and mental health issues, it's not possible. So, we work with getting them into a guardianship or into a foster family. To be a volunteer, I went through 3 months of training. We had training twice a week. It was about 3 hours each. And there is a training coming up in February. I'll put that information in the chat for everybody. You have to be able to pass a background check, and having some daytime availability during the week is definitely a plus. And just having, liking, if you like to write, that's definitely a plus as well, because you're going to be writing court reports for the judge. The judge does look at them. They do take it into consideration. I have been called on the stand before. So, a lot of times these cases will run on for a couple years. One of my first cases, I was the only person on the case that had been there the entire time. Social workers, visitation coaches had all changed numerous times. And I actually got called on the stand to testify, and I was able to prove that what the parent was saying was untrue. And therefore, it turned out better for the child. And I had proof because of previous reports and everything. So it is a very validating position. It is very emotional, very, very emotional. But I think that really you just want to need to be able to have a need for, helping a child. My volunteer supervisors are fantastic. They were amazing throughout the training. And at the end of the training, you get a personal supervisor. So I'm able to check in with my supervisor. She'll go over my report with me. She's there to help me emotionally, if there's some things going on in the case that gets to be a little bit much for me. So they're very, very supportive. And I know right now there are about 380 children in Buncombe County alone in the system, and we only have 200 volunteers. So we definitely need more volunteers. I love what I do as a volunteer. I've been with them for 3 years, and I don't think I will ever not do this. So I would love to answer any questions that anybody has about it. Just let me know.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I'm going to reiterate that the difference between the case of a child in foster care from having a good engaged GAL to either not having one or having one that's holding a half a dozen cases is night and day. And so it's such an important role that Stephanie and all the other GALs play. And so I really wanted to drill that home. Okay, and then Kyle and Brooke, how could I forget? The Odoms. You want to share who you are? And well, you know the drill at this stage. You know the drill.
Yeah, I'm new to this.
Okay. Kyle Odom, Brooke Odom. So we will be playing the role, I suppose, of the foster parents. So I'll just tell you, I won't take too long. Just tell you a little bit how we got into it and when. I think Brooke kind of came to me. She was doing a study through the book of James with one of her friends. And God was speaking to her about kind of how we can serve, and the idea of foster parenting came to her. So she brought it to me, and we talked about it. And before you know it, we were signing up with to go through the training to become foster parents with Black Mountain Home. Alex actually did our training. Yeah, good job, sir. And so that was probably spring of 2018, I believe. So it was it 8 or 12 weeks? I forget. But it was a
10.
10. Well, whatever. It's in the middle. so we went through 10 weeks of training, kind of 4-hour class a week. And we ended up getting licensed, went through the whole process probably by October of 2018. So, and we could have probably done it a little quicker too, but
there's a lot of paperwork.
There's a lot of paperwork. And then we ended up getting our first placements right at the start of 2019. And I say first placement, it's our first and only placement. We had a little boy, he was about 1.5 years when he came with us. And then he stayed with us for about a whole year. So in early, January of this year, he actually was reunited with his biological mom. So that's kind of our perspective now. Every case, every foster child you have is going to have, so many different needs that they're gonna need to be met, and we're just kind of coming from what we know from our single placement now. But I will say, right now what we are doing is respite care. It's not to say we may not take another placement in the future. That's essentially where, when we were foster parents and we needed a break, we could call up our social worker and let them know, what we're needing, and say we were wanting to just take a little family vacation, and they could find someone who's a licensed respite care foster parent. It's essentially the same process you go through, and then that person could be able to provide respite for you, kind of so you don't get burnt out, essentially. So that's kind of the role that we're playing right now, as respite care foster parents. You want to add anything else? No.
I'm sure you'll be inundated with questions momentarily.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spill all of my knowledge right here at the start.
No, that's fine. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I'm sure that there will be questions about what kind of paperwork did you have to do and all of those kinds of things, but I'm sure we'll get to that in time. That's the bottom of my list. Apart from myself, I know a great many of the faces, or at least the names on the screen. For those of you who don't know, my name is Alex. If you know me, it's likely from being at church. I may have thrown candy at you at one point in the past. May not necessarily. It's a possibility. I want to share a little bit about myself and the space that I'm trying to fill in the ever-growing world of foster care. I've been in the field for 8 or 9 years. I helped to start the foster care program at Black Mountain Home for Children. I was there for about 6 years. And then an opportunity with another private agency called Crossnall came up, and the timing was right for a move. And I was there for a little under 2 years, but about 2 months ago, a door and an opportunity opened, which I jumped on board because it has been my passion project for the last 8 or 9 years. Myself, in collaboration with a few people who have been phenomenal, we've started a new nonprofit called Fostering Hopes. And the goal of Fostering Hopes is to do 2 main things. One is to help agencies like Buncombe County DSS to increase the recruitment of foster parents and to license more families. So we don't license families to do anything. We're simply trying to get people through the door and direct them to great people like Amy. And then the other side, the other thing that we're focused on trying to do is help to reduce burnout for foster parents, because foster parenting is a difficult calling to be in. And the national average burnout rate for foster parents, it's about 1 year or 1 placement. And that needs to be improved. And so Fostering Hopes is really focused on helping, whether it be a church community or a business or another community entity, find ways to become involved in foster care. Because I think for too long, the narrative of foster care has been, I'm either a foster parent or I'm not a foster parent. And the conversation often stops there. And the truth is, and that's what tonight is really about, is to let people know that, yes, there is a huge need for more foster parents, that simply aren't enough, and the need is going to continue to grow. But there's ample ways, and there's a lot of space and a lot of seats at the table to become involved beyond simply being a foster parent. And so that's what we're going to be helping to try and do, is give people avenues and access to become involved, whether that's becoming a guardian ad litem or a foster parent, or setting up a church ministry surrounding foster care. And so but Fostering Hopes is brand new. Our website's not even live yet, but it will be in the next, hopefully, month. This is a passion of mine. And so that's why I'm here, and I'm thankful for David for creating the space for this conversation to happen tonight. And so, so now it's really over to the people who've not spoken so far, to hopefully not give us a long 5-minute awkward silence of no questions, and somebody to be brave and ask a question, and for us to share some collective knowledge about the growing need of foster care and what it means to become involved.
I have a question. What kind of families is the foster care system looking for to be involved? Like, what are the qualities that they need, or the types of environments that they need to support a foster child?
Amy, do you want to answer that?
Now I got it to work. Well, I think that what I will say is that foster parents come in every box, really. And the reason that is because all of our kids are so different. We have kids that are like little tiny babies that are, coming off of drugs that were, put in their systems by moms who had some terrible addiction issues. And then we have like other kids that maybe Brent works with that are 18, have been in foster care their whole life, and they don't know how to wash clothes. They don't know how to make macaroni and cheese. And so like there's a gamut of kids, they all need help in one way or another. I would say in Buncombe County, currently we have anywhere from, averages between like 100 and 120 kids that aren't living in this county. And there's lots of reasons for why that happens, but primarily when kids come into care, it's not usually just one kid, one baby, one teen. Usually they come in sibling groups, right? And so there's a big lack of here in the Buncombe County area are families that are willing to take more than one foster child at a time. So we are lots of times faced with the situation of, like today, for instance, we had 2 boys, a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old. We had lots of families that were going to be willing to take the 5-year-old boy, but nobody who could take the 9-year-old boy. So we're faced with the decision, should we split these boys up and leave one of them in Buncombe, or leave them in 2 different homes in Buncombe County? Or do we send them to someplace like Gaston County or Lincoln County, several hours away, where they can be together in a foster home? So really that's a need that we have, are trying to have families that can consider taking sibling groups together. And I think Brent could probably speak as well to the other need that we have, are folks that are willing to try on teenagers. I think that teenagers, that's my passion project, Alex, are teenagers, honestly. Because I feel like teenagers in foster care get such a bad rap. And I don't know where that is, because, if we're honest, every teenager should get a bad rap. I mean, they all have horrible attitudes, and they all are, experimenting with life. That's just part of being a teenager. We were all there before. And I think that they get a bad rap pretty often. And so, being able to have people that are flexible and patient with different kinds of kids that are coming in with different behaviors is huge, and everybody's got their own set of skills when it comes to that. Whether you've been a parent before, you've worked with kids before, everyone comes to the table with different ideas, and that's usually exactly what we need when we talk about child and family teams, like all coming together at the table. Everyone's got some different ideas and some different views on how it needs to work. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but that's what I gotta say.
And Drew, what I would add to what Amy shared is that it's my personal feeling that people who start the licensing or start the training process, the pre-service training process, have a whether you call it a calling or are drawn to learning more about foster care, and you may have an idea in your mind of what that might look like, but through that 6 weeks, 8 weeks, however long it ends up being, if you have good trainers, they're going to help you to figure out and really hone in on what does this mean? Because you may come into this thinking, I want one child who's under the age of 2. But actually, as you hear more about the stories and you learn more about the need, that changes to being, you know what, actually we can take 2 children or 3 children or 5 children, or these teens don't sound as scary as it may seem. And so I think the details of what it looks like to become a foster parent become clearer through that training process. And will hopefully give you the idea and the opportunity to understand the makeup of your own home and what is going to fit in your home and what's not going to fit in your home, or work in your home at least.
Right, because when it comes down to it, all these kids in foster care are just kids when it comes down to it. Sure, they've been through some pretty scary stuff, but usually those are their family stories and they're just the bystander of some terrible stuff that has happened. And so at the end of the day, you know, those teens that seem so horrible, not really, maybe they just have a chip on their shoulder because, you know, they have just had a really rough road. And so it takes a lot of kind hearts to be able to see past some of that sometimes and really understand that these kids just want what everyone else wants. They just, you know, they want to have a bed to sleep in at night, and they want to have someone that loves them, you know, and sometimes they want an Xbox. I mean, that's true. Yeah, they're just like every other kid out there.
Hey, this is Beth. I just had a quick question. What are the basic requirements or needs in terms of a household? I mean, do you need X number of square feet, you know, for extra space, or kind of logistics? What are the minimum? Is there a minimum requirement? And what does that look like if it does exist?
There's not a minimum requirement. Alex, feel free to chip in. There's not a minimum requirement. Really what the child needs to do is a bed. And that could even be a bedroom shared with your biological child if it's within a certain age range. There are a couple of rules about that. But really what you just need to have is, you know, the time and the energy and the desire and an extra bed.
Yeah, I would echo that. If you, broadly speaking, you're not going to be able to have more than 5 children in your home. And so let's say you already have 3 children. Realistically, you're going to be capped at having 2 children in foster care. There's the potential of a waiver if it's part of a sibling group, but broadly speaking, it's 5 children. And as Amy said, it's not a square footage minimum on bedrooms. It's really that a child has their own space and their own, they're not sleeping on an air mattress or in a tent outside, that they have a bed, that they have a dresser or a wardrobe space or somewhere to be able to have their stuff and have a degree of permanence while they're in your home. But beyond that, it's a lot of flexibility.
I had a question. I guess I actually have 2 questions, but I can hold off.
Only one.
Okay. Well, my first question would be to the Odoms. I would like to know what was the hardest part for you guys, and if there was any missing support, what you wish that would be.
The hardest part, I think I had the idea in my head that I have 3 kids, I'm home with the kids all the time. What's the difference in adding a 4th kid? I thought it would be way simpler than it was. Just because when a child is put in foster care, there's a lot of extra doctor's appointments, a lot of social work visits, court dates. There's a lot of extra stuff that you don't do with your biological kids as much. Therapy appointments. And I had to drive 20 minutes to daycare too, because they wanted to keep him in his daycare. So it was just a lot busier than I was expecting. And I hadn't prepared for that. And so Kyle was talking earlier before everyone jumped on. It made our marriage hard because we ended up splitting up and like, you take the boys, I'll take the girls, because we weren't prepared for like how busy we would be. And Alex tried to prepare us, but when you hear stuff,
we're stubborn.
I don't know, it doesn't sink in until you're in the moment doing it. But we honestly had great support from community group at church and friends. And I can't imagine how we would have made it through without that support. So my encouragement to like, for people listening on this and to the church is like, if you know there's a foster family in your church, ask them if you can be their support and like check in on them every week. What do you need? Do you need me to drive them to daycare today? Do you need me to watch your kids while you go to the doctor appointment with your foster child? You know, just like practical things like that. But checking in weekly would probably be amazing for that foster family.
Thank you. The other one kind of ties in with that. Amy, Alex, and Brent. I've heard a lot about birth order and going out of your birth order. I've heard like pros and cons of that, and I just wanted to hear I guess your personal opinions on that.
I don't know that I have a strong opinion on that, honestly. I think that choosing to foster is a family decision, and that everyone has to be on board for it to be successful and for it to be an experience that's going to be positive for everybody on the back end. So I think that that's almost up to a family to decide together. I don't know. I will say that there are lots of families that certainly do request that they want kids younger than their oldest biological child. That's not unfamiliar request.
Yeah, I agree. It's really just a preference with regard to the foster family, as far as what they feel would be the best fit for their home and for their family. I did foster care for quite a few years before I moved to 18 to 21. And I mean, I can't ever think of it being an issue in a particular placement or anything that I can recall.
I would echo that last bit, Kendall, and you're probably frustrated that everybody's giving very diplomatic responses of what's up to you. But the truth is, it is, because you know your family, you know your children better than anybody does, and that's what it comes down to. I would echo what Brent said, is I can't think of any placement that I've been part of or any degree that has failed or had this massive issue because of birth order. I honestly can't think of a time that it's been this meltdown issue. And so I think it really is, it's it's for you and Parker, and you know your girls better than anybody, and and as Amy said, it's a very common thing for people to request, and understandably why. In the same breath, I know of a lot of families that's not been a requirement, and it's worked out. So it's really is your choice.
Can I ask a question to Brett? Brent, the question I have very quickly is, describe some of the needs of these 18 to 21-year-olds. Are they looking for encouragement, a life coach, someone to maybe help them in the next step on a vocational path, or looking for ways to, just connect and grow? Just describe a little bit what some of those dynamics are like. It sounds like from your early description that they're often on the fence, wanting to maybe step away from the foster care dynamic, but a little, a little concerned or risky to do that. So I just would love to hear your insight on that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. They need all of the things that you mentioned, and a lot more. That's definitely things that they need. Now, whether or not they're going to be open to striking up a relationship with somebody that they don't know just right off the bat, and opening up about those things that they need, and all the things that they feel like they need to do, that's a whole nother question. I mean, they're out on their own for the first time. If they've been in foster care for a long time, they've been lucky to be involved in much of any kind of decision for the time period that they've been in foster care. So once they reach that 18th birthday, they're really eager to make all their own choices on their own. But you know, what I would say is that the best thing in terms of support that someone could provide for them would be just somebody to check in on them from time to time and say, you know, how are things going? Is there anything that you need? And just be a person that would be willing to listen to anything that they felt like, you know, that they had on their heart or on their mind that they felt like they needed to talk about. Obviously, it might take a little while to get to that point where they're really, you know, interested in talking to somebody that, you know, about serious things. But really, like I say, we're trying to expand their network of support, and it's not an easy thing to do because they're not always real receptive to that, especially right off the bat, especially right, you know, after turning 18. But you know, my experience has been as they, you know, as a couple more birthdays go by, they turn 19, they turn 20, they've had a chance to do a few things on their own and try a few things. They tend to sometimes get a little more receptive to that kind of thing. So, you know, they do need encouragement, but the biggest thing that I feel like they need is somebody that will listen to them about anything that they want to talk about, and somebody that would be there for them to contact anytime they got, you know, they were in a situation where they felt like, whoa, I need to talk to somebody about this. I mean, I try to fill that role as much as I can, but I'm a social worker, and I'm still the face of DSS for them. So, you know, that doesn't always go well. You know, I do my best to work around that, but, you know, there are some barriers that go along with that. But to have somebody that's not associated with DSS, that, you know, would be just a person out there that's a support person for them would be tremendous.
I have a question. And I guess this is probably for Alex and Brent and Amy. We know that these kids are, you know, entering into the system because of a history of trauma, whether they're dealing with addiction in the home, physical abuse, mental health issues, you know, there's always something going on. So is there any education? And if so, you know, what kind of education around trauma is there for families looking to foster? And I'm sure, you know, Brent, you see this a lot, especially with the teenagers, not being as receptive to somebody who is warm and loving because they've had such a history of trauma. Is that something that's talked about with foster families? Do they know to really expect this? Because if you don't have a history of trauma, if you're not educated around this, you don't always understand that these behaviors and issues showing up is, you know, because of years of trauma and abuse.
There are tons of avenues. You know, that's for Buncombe County in particular. That's one of our major, one of our initiatives that we've been working on for the past 2 years, is to make sure that everybody is educated about trauma and everyone's given the tools that they need to be able to move forward in a positive way. So that's the kids that we work with, the families that we work with, the foster families, the social workers, the clerical people that are getting yelled at. I mean, we want everybody to be able to you know, to move past that in such a way that they can still provide support for these kids in our community. So for foster parents, we partner with an agency called Children's Home Society, and they do a course called Managing Difficult Behaviors, Understanding and Managing Difficult Behaviors. And it really does a great job of helping foster parents and caregivers understand how the brain development works in regards to trauma, and then takes a look at, now that we know this and we know that these kids' behaviors aren't going to be the same as our biological children or other children that haven't been through the same kinds of experiences, how can we now you know, move forward with them? How can we figure out a consequence that will work? How can we figure out a way to structure their days so that they can be successful, they can complete their schoolwork? So that's something that we do. But even from the beginning, when we talk about those very first classes, the MAP class or the Deciding Together classes, there are components built into that are already starting that education about how trauma affects the children and what foster families can expect in regards to the behaviors they'll see and what kind of supports are going to be available to them. we try our best to do that, because what I see with foster parents is they're the greatest resource that the county has. Foster parents do get a stipend for taking care of a kid, but basically you're volunteering your heart and your time in your home. And like the Odoms are saying, you put up with a lot. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's great, and I'm not saying that there's not positive things about it. Absolutely they are. I mean, I wouldn't be an adoptive parent if I didn't find some joy in it, but it's a lot of work. And so we want to make sure everyone's supported. So even at our agency, we pay for foster parents to go to therapy sessions if they need it, if they're having a rough time with their kid, or they're having a rough time with the child and family team, or placement disruption. We want to support them in just every possible way. And this partnership that we're doing with other agencies as well, we're making this training that we utilize available to every single foster home that provides care to a child that's in Buncombe County DSS custody. So we're trying really hard to get the information out as much as we can. And those classes that we're teaching foster parents, it's the same language that the kids are learning in school from their social workers in regards to how their brain operates. And are they coming from a place of like flight or fright and those kind of things. And it's the same information that our social workers are being taught when we hire new social workers. They go through 3 days of the same kind of training to learn exactly what these kids are going through and how to support the people that are there to work with the children. There's a lot of time and a lot of efforts being put into making sure that everyone has good information and feels supported through it.
And then to take that a step further, one of the things that everything that Amy said is spot on. I think people understanding at least a basic understanding of trauma and the impact on brain and therefore behavior is really important. And so one of the things that we're hoping to be able to do as well is, if a church community said, we get really passionate about foster care, we want to help to recruit 5, 10, 20 foster parents, that means your children's program is then going to be flooded with children who are in foster care and who've been in challenging situations. And so what does that mean for the children's workers and the volunteers who are working with those children week in, week out? And so one of the things that we want to be able to do, for the exact same reason that Amy just shared, is to do training with children workers or church communities or other community entities who are going to be regularly involved with children who find themselves in these situations. Again, to continue to share the same type of language and to give people or to give children the opportunity to be as successful as they can in all of the different realms of life that they operate. And so.
Yeah, and I would just add with regard to the trauma thing for teenagers, one of the, could be a plus. A lot of times the teenagers, if they're in therapy, if they've had trauma in their background, they're probably in some kind of trauma focused therapy. And with the teenager, with an older kid like that, they can tell you, well, here's what I'm learning in therapy. And when I get, to this sort of behavior, here's the kind of response that I need. So, that's, when you have an older kid like that and is involved in therapy like that, that can be a plus for sure.
Fantastic.
I have a question. My name is Maureen, and I have a question for Stephanie. Regarding the GAL, do you just have one case at a time? And also, I know you mentioned there was some writings and paperwork and things like that. How much time did you, on average, dedicate towards that? A week, or I guess I'm just interested in a little bit more about on those terms.
Yeah, so you can take on as many cases as you want. It's really, based on your schedule, your availability, and I am 110% committed to my cases. So I probably spend a little bit more time than the average GAL. It's very important to me because of my personal history to make sure that this is done and it's done right. When I first started, I just took one case, and I used to visit this child weekly at school. So maybe an hour there. I spent time on the phone, chatting with people. There's a lot of time communicating with the social workers and stuff. And as far as writing, I like to write. I want to make sure that my report looks really good. So I do spend, more time on that. There are older individuals, people that have retired, they take on several cases at once. Right now I have 3 cases on my caseload, and that's just kind of because I'm coming towards the end of some of them. But you can always communicate with your supervisor about your availability level. If I'm not able to make it to court, if I'm not able to, do something, I always communicate that with my supervisor, and she can pick up the slack for me. She can go to court for me. She can show up virtually, since that's what we're doing these days. It does take some time, as far as showing up in court. If you're scheduled at 9 a.m., they might hear your case, they might not. There's been times that, I've taken off work to be in court and my case got rescheduled for, 6 weeks out or 3 months out, kind of thing. So it does depend on the caseload. It depends on what's going on with, that child too, whether it's addiction issues with the family or mental health issues. So it is very dependent on the cases that you take. But I have always felt very confident with the support of my supervisors. I can always reach out to her, and she has just been fantastic, and all of them are fantastic about it. Hope that helps.
Is it time to ask more questions? Okay. How do you, for school-age children, how do you do their school? We are homeschooling right now our children. What does that look like for the foster child coming into family?
Well, it's one of those questions again where like every situation is different. There are definitely some laws set up around this, and just kind of a quick snapshot of it is, if a kid is able to stay in their home school or home daycare, we want them to. It helps just continue some connections and some familiar faces and processes that they're, one less change in their life. So what happens when a kid comes into foster care is the foster parents and your licensing worker are invited to a meeting where you talk about this. Is it in the kid's best interest to stay in that school or not? And like, what are the barriers around that being able to happen? Right now, it's kind of tricky. I will say, like, lots of kids are just at home virtually schooling, but whenever school kind of does go back into session, there are definitely resources available to help out. So like, someone was saying they had to drive their child to a daycare 20 minutes away because it was their home daycare. There are some like supports financially in place to help out with that in regards to mileage. If it's a complete hardship, it could happen, but it's a hardship in order for the travel to happen. Like, there's some transportation resources available. It just really depends. But again, if the foster home is like the next county over, we're not going to ask those folks to drive into, to Buncombe County to take that kid to school. But if at all possible, when it's in the county, we do want them to stay in the same school, just so they're not switching teachers. Because lots of times kids that have, so many troubles at home, like that teacher or that cafeteria worker or that bus driver, that is their connection. That is their resource adult. And so we don't want that to be taken away from them as well when we're talking about, and also, your family is gone as well. It's a very important piece to a kid to be able to keep their friends and their teachers around.
I want to make sure Maureen knows that Stephanie added a few things to the chat about how often she writes. So hopefully you're seeing that as well. And while I've got the mic, hey, Brent, you were kind enough to share with me about some levels of care. We've talked a lot about kids who've been through trauma. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about those levels.
Sure. Yeah, there are various levels of care. It may be, Amy might be better. Amy, feel free to chime in. There's what's called family foster care, which is kind of the lowest level of care. That's where when somebody goes through Amy's licensing, her staff's licensing class and gets licensed as a foster parent, that's what they are. They're family foster care. That's what we call level 1. Then there's level 2, which is what's called therapeutic foster care, where a foster parent would go through training to receive more intensive instruction related to trauma, kids that have experienced trauma and how best to, strategies and how best to deal with behaviors that go along with kids who have dealt with a lot of trauma. So that's level 2. Then there's level 3, which is group home care, where kids, live in a group home environment where there's like house parents and then up to, I believe, 5 or 6 kids in the home. Level 3, and then level 4 is what's called PRTF. That's Psychiatric Residential Treatment Facility. That would be a locked psychiatric facility. So that's level 4. That's the highest level. So those are the 4 levels of care.
I would add in that they're very fluid, these levels. So when kids come in, we always look to put them in the lowest level of care. And, there's lots of assessments that happen when kids first come in, because, imagine you just went through some kind of, I'll just pick a worst case scenario. I don't know. Imagine that you're 6 years old and the police busted up into your house in the middle of the night. Now your parents are in jail and you're sitting in an office with strangers. That's a pretty traumatic experience for anybody, no matter what age you are. So you have to understand that the kids' reactions to what's going on, whether it might come out as aggression or just crying, hysterical, like it's all based on what's going on at the moment. So those levels of care are very fluid. Now, granted, there are some kids that have some pretty significant issues that require more supervision and more intervention, and they do go to group homes, but the thing is that they step back down. And so those level 1 foster parents that have those kids, like often we see that they build a relationship with the kid, but the kid maybe is having just too many issues and not able to maintain in that home and in that community. They may go to a higher level of care, one of those ones that Brent talked about. But we like to maintain those relationships as much as possible, because we know at some point in time that child's going to step back down, and it makes more sense and the best sense for them emotionally and psychologically to go back to a home where they already had a bond with somebody. So that's the one thing about the levels is that they are very fluid.
So I'm conscious of the time. It's been a great conversation, and an hour, or close to an hour, has gone by very, very quickly. And so what we would like to be able to do is, respecting everybody's time, if you need to leave at 7:30 because whatever reason your favorite show is about to start and you don't have a DVR, then we want to be able to finish on time so you can do that. But in the same breath, we want to be able to continue the conversation if you want to be able to continue that conversation. And more specifically, as we mentioned at the start, look to put some folks in some breakout rooms. And so, for example, if you're really interested in learning more about what being a GAL means on a day-to-day or week-to-week, and you want to have a more one-on-one conversation, or however many people would end up in that breakout room, then we'd like to be able to do that. In the same way, if you were interested in what it means to become involved in foster care outside of just becoming a foster parent, we just want to be able to make those spaces. So I think David's going to work on the logistics of how that's going to happen, because again, I'm not all that familiar with Zoom. Different platforms have been my go-to for the last year. But the note and the sentiment that I really wanted to leave everybody with tonight, other than saying thank you again for being here, is the foster care is a ever-growing crisis in our communities. And for too long, it's been hidden in plain sight about the impact and the implications today, but also the impacts and implications tomorrow and in the future, because foster care is so very cyclical. And so my hope for how we end this evening, or what you take away from this evening, in addition to hopefully finding an avenue to get plugged in, is to continue to be vocal, because Amy or myself or Brent or Stephanie and the Odoms, we can have conversations. But if everybody who hears about foster care and learns a little bit about foster care can continue to tell the story and let people know that, hey, did you know that for 25% of young people who turn 18, they instantly become homeless? That's the national statistic. That's the national average for young people who turn 18. Or that the burnout rate of foster parents is difficult. is high because foster parenting is difficult, and there are ways that we can support foster parents to decrease that burnout rate, or that there's a lot of ways that that you can support families or children in any form. And so that's one of my hopes, is that we can continue to educate everybody on the immediate need and the growing need of foster care. So that's my last 2 cents. David, how do you want to? And so I'm going to give you the freedom. If it's 7:30 and you're like, no, I agree to 7:30 and I'm out of here. You've burnt your time. Then you have the freedom to leave. But if you do want to stick around and talk to some folks a little bit more, I'm going to put him on the spot. David is going to succinctly explain how that is going to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for coming and speaking with us. And thank you all for coming and listening. I really appreciate it.